Hustling for attention has a cost, and it's not just your time. It costs you your voice. When you write from a place of what's going to get the most engagement, you start making tiny little compromises. You soften the edge that made your work interesting. You're likely to reach for the safe story or the message that feels comfortable instead of the true one. Hey everyone, it's Alice. Welcome back to your Write Life Coach, the podcast for heart-led authors who are ready for motivation and momentum. Today, I want to talk about something I see quietly draining writers dry: hustling for attention. Not the hard work of writing, not the courage it takes to put your words out into the world. I'm talking about something different, that frantic, breathless, never enough energy that comes when you start chasing visibility instead of creating it from authenticity. If you've ever felt like you're doing all the things, posting, promoting, showing up everywhere, and still feel invisible, or worse, like you've lost the thread back to why you started writing in the first place, this one's for you. Stay with me. I want to tell you a story about a writer I worked with a few years ago. I'll call her Mary, not her real name. She came to me with a manuscript that was honestly one of the most powerful pieces I had read in a long time. She had personal essays, a strong message. It was real, honest, tender, with just enough levity. The kind of writing that makes you lean in and beg for more. It was the kind of writing that makes me forget to read like an editor. But on our first coaching call, the first thing she said to me wasn't about her book. It was, I need to grow my social media following before I can work on anything else. I asked her to say more, and what came out was this whole tangled story about a writers' conference she'd attended where an author with 60,000 followers had a very loud opinion about what authors needed to do to be seen. Post daily, be on Instagram Reels, become famous before your book is even done. And Mary had been trying to do all of it for 6 months, maybe longer. She hadn't written a book proposal, even though an editor at the conference invited her to send one. And she hadn't written a word of her manuscript in 6 months. I asked her how she felt when she was writing before all of this. She got really quiet, and then she said, honestly, writing used to feel like coming home. It used to. That phrase echoed in my mind for a long time. Used to, because something had shifted. Mary's writing that once felt like coming home had been replaced by a performance. She wasn't writing to connect anymore. She was writing and posting and showing up to be noticed. And somehow in all that noise, she'd gotten completely disconnected from the heart of her message that made her words worth reading in the first place. And seriously, I know this firsthand. A few years ago, I signed up for an online marketing course. I didn't even have a book yet, but the be everywhere pressure got to me anyway. I tried posting clever memes, and they fell flat. No engagement, just digital silence. I did some Facebook Lives, and the first one got attention, but only because it was upside down. That was pretty funny. The algorithm rewarded my technical incompetence, but my intentional posts, I didn't even hear crickets. And then I ran out of ideas entirely. But more than that, I kept waiting to feel like myself again, and instead I felt further and further from the writer or the author I actually really wanted to be. I wasn't out of content, I was out of alignment. I'd been trying to sound like everyone else, and in doing so, I had stopped sounding like me. And that's when I realized this isn't just Mary's experience. I've watched this happen to writer after writer, talented, purposeful, heart-led writers who come to the work with something real to say. And then somewhere along the way, they start listening to the noise more than their own voice. Which brings me what I want to share with you today, because I keep seeing it, and I think it needs to be said out loud. Hustling for attention has a cost, and it's not just your time. It costs you your voice. Here's what I mean. When you write from a place of what's going to get the most engagement, you start making tiny little compromises. You soften the edge that made your work interesting. You're likely to reach for the safe story or the message that feels comfortable instead of the true one. You write the caption you think people want to read instead of the one that's actually burning in you. And none of those compromises feel big in the moment, but over time, they add up. And one day you sit down to write, and you realize you don't quite recognize yourself on the page anymore. I've worked with a lot of writers over the years, and what I see over and over again are the writers who build the most meaningful connection with readers are not the ones who hustled the hardest for attention. They're the ones who stayed most fiercely committed to their personal convictions. Readers don't fall in love with your follower content. They fall in love with you the moment they read something and think, she gets me. He gets me. That's it. That's the whole thing. So what does that actually look like in practice? Let me break this down into something you can use. First of all, notice where your writing energy is going. Are you creating? Are you performing? There's nothing wrong with showing up online. I'm not saying disappear from the internet, but what I want you to pay attention to is the feeling underneath the action. Creating feels like you have something to say. It feels warm and energizing. Performing feels like you need to be seen. It feels tight and restrictive. Between creating and performing, one of those is sustainable. The other will hollow you out. Second, protect your writing time like it's sacred, because it is. Before you check your metrics, before you draft your next post, before you do anything for your platform, write. Even 10 minutes, even a messy paragraph that goes nowhere. Keep the thread moving back to your own voice, because that thread is everything. Mary and I made one simple rule. Every writing session started with 20 minutes of private, unpublishable writing. Not for anyone, just for her. Within 3 weeks, she said the writing started to feel like coming home again. She started feeling connected to her readers again, even though they weren't reading anything yet. But third, this is the one I want you to really let sink in. Visibility that isn't rooted in your authentic voice isn't actually visibility, it's just noise. Here's what I know to be true. You don't need 60,000 followers. You need the right people, the readers who need exactly what only you can offer. And those people, they find you through your genuine presence, not your hustle. I don't have all the answers on what the algorithm wants this week, but I've been watching this pattern for a long time from inside the publishing world. And the writers who are still standing, still creating, still building something real 10 years later, they're the ones who never stop writing for the love of it. And when they do show up on social media, they're real people with foibles and flaws. Sometimes they show up with no makeup on. So here's your invitation for this week. Just one thing. I want you to write something you're not going to post and you're not going to publish. Not a draft, not a caption, not content, just writing. Something private, something true, something you're writing for no one but yourself. Maybe it's the scene that's been sitting in the back of your mind. Maybe it's the honest version of a message you've been watering down. Maybe it's even the story or the message that you just couldn't even get out yet. But whatever it is, write it. Let it be messy. Let it be unseen. Let it remind you what your voice actually sounds like when no one's watching. That's the voice your readers are waiting for. That's the writing that changes people's lives. And you cannot give that to the world if you've spent your time and energy hustling for attention. If today's episode resonated with you, I have a free guide that might help you reconnect with your reader, your ideal reader, the person you're actually writing for. It's called Creating an Ideal Reader Avatar, and it's a beautiful reset when you've gotten tangled up in what does everyone want instead of who am I really writing to. You can grab it through the link in the show notes. And remember, you have a story worth telling or a message worth delivering, friend. Don't trade it for likes. I'll be back next week, and until then, keep writing, keep showing up. Your words matter. If this episode struck a chord in you, would you please share it with a friend who would appreciate it? Think of someone who's been pouring their heart into their writing and wondering why it's not landing. Send it their way. And if you have a minute, leaving a review helps more heart-led authors find their way here. I read them all, and I'm genuinely grateful for every single one.